Yo, what up, dude? So I have some emails, some FAQs. I'm cold that I want to get to that I believe are really good questions that deserve, a highly elaborated answer. I don't know, but let's dive in. So this person reaches out, says, I have a couple questions here, and how can I help my pitchers? So he's a college catcher, currently a freshman, transfer, started for our team, however, severely struggle with pitch calling and pitchers shaking me off a tremendous amount. I relate that to our team's high ERA. I seen your videos about pitchers and catchers relationships and was curious what your best catchers have done for you that have helped make you and your team better. I know that as a catcher, there's a lot of little things that I could do to improve our team's ERA, help win games. And so basically I wanted to ask, as you are an elite pitcher, thank you, what you like from a guy behind the dish. So there's another question that I'll hit on in a little bit, but just to hammer that one home is, so there's a ton of different variables when I talk about like what I like in a catcher, because it's this interesting relationship dynamic that something to do with a catcher, again, this is for me, something to do with a catcher that absolutely grinds and like busts his butt and works hard every single pitch, doesn't take a pitch off. I get this sense of like respect factor for him that almost allows me to do the exact same, which obviously is important as a pitcher because you can't take pitches off, right? So when it comes to pitch calling and when it comes to essentially just like the broad question of what do I like in a catcher, right, is the communication aspect. I love, and I'm a big communicator, so I'm going to basically as a pitcher do this often with whoever my catcher is, but any catcher that is willing to come up to me and meet me in the dugout between half innings and talk about, hey, like, what do you got on this and that and this, basically just establish that line of communication so there's no confusion of what to do in certain counts, and there's always that trust factor. I think anytime that a pitcher can have absolute 110% trust in a catcher, that's going to make everyone's job a lot easier and it's going to look a lot better during performance. So that goes into, like I said, the communication of in between innings, before the games, after the games, eating dinner, but also like go out of your way as a catcher, even if you're playing that day. I know it's a grind, I know it's tough, especially in the summer, but go out of your way and be like, hey, I want to catch your bullpen today because I want to get a feel for like how your stuff moves and maybe some personal cues that I can relay to you when you're in need of that assistance, right? And so as for pitchers, man, it's our responsibility too to kind of do these things, right? To go the extra mile, to obviously first and foremost identify what you like in a catcher, so then you can relay that to your catchers. But trust factor is huge. The trust factor is instilled by the constant communication and the establishing of that relationship. But hopefully you can take something from that question. Second question is helping pitchers out with their mindset. I've noticed a lot of guys, especially one of my buddies, throwing bullpens with different off speed from their pitches in a game. I like to say it's lack of intent with pitches, but I am not too sure. Do you have any ideas on what things I can communicate to get both results in practice? So I actually just read that question before I hopped on. I had a completely different thought process of what that question was, but now I'm thinking it's about maybe the pitchers in practice and in bullpens not taking it seriously and just being lazy with their off-speed pitches, and then in games getting after it more. Because at first I thought it was the opposite, where his teammates in bullpens were throwing better off-speed pitches than they were in games. So I'll essentially speak to both, I guess. So the way I initially took it was, if you're throwing like essentially better, more executed pitches in bullpens than you're in games, that's just this external pressure and this essentially negative mindset to not make a mistake, which creates this physical restriction for us as pitchers. And in bullpens, there's obviously there's no one in the box, so you could throw a ball 40 feet and no terrible results are going to happen from it besides the catcher being pissed. But in bullpens, there's a lot more freedom, because you can not execute a pitch and you're not going to watch it go over the stands, right? So there's that, the question of being like, okay, well, how do we instill freedom on the mound in a game for the pitchers, right? And I think that can also be a catcher's responsibility, because typically the type of personality traits that a guy that possesses that type of quality of throwing better pitches in bullpens and games, I'm actually one of those guys. I've been through moments in my career where I've freaking thrown so many no-hitters in bullpens, and I go out in a game and I'd suck. And it's an affirmations thing, right? So like our personality traits, we do very well with affirmations. So anytime you can as a catcher, like pump them up, like, hey, great pitch, dude. Like, hey, let's go, man. Hey, let's do this and that. Positive affirmations are going to be the complete difference maker for those types of guys. And again, I'm speaking from personal experience, but I think piggybacking off the communication part too, man, like have that sit down with your buddy that's doing this and be like, hey, you're pounding the zone and a bullpen, your pitches are nasty in this bullpen, let's repeat that in a game. Like what's it going to take? How are we going to create that freedom and start learning? Because more oftentimes than not, that type of pitcher is not going to be able to understand who he is and what's working for him. So maybe you guys can go about that identification process together. Now, if the way that I interpreted this question was different, and I interpreted it as in his bullpen's bush league and then his game's obviously more intent, that's just about the communication of how bad do you want it, man? Like you gotta showcase your ability to put in the work, as not only for the individual but also for the rest of the guys to see, right? Because especially if this guy's is doing it and he's like the junior or the senior team captain and he's lackadaisical in his bullpen or whatever, this goes for catchers too, and people see that, and that sets an example for the rest of the team. So I think there's got to be an accountability set in place there of like, hey, we don't do this, we don't practice this way. It's a direct carryover to your games, and I think it's just having the cojones, I guess, to hold people accountable to a higher standard and essentially command and demand excellence from your guys, knowing that it's there and they just got to bring it out. So yeah, great questions. Hopefully that helps. Best of luck to you, dude, in your career, and anyone who watches this. I'll include the link to the pitcher catcher stuff, or all the pitcher catcher stuff that I've done in the past, for you guys to check out.